Hey everybody, this is sci-fi author Christopher Laird, and today I will be doing a book review. And today's book review will be about the novel Dr. Benjamin Franklin's Dream America. So this is a novel. This is the back of it, and the author is Damien Ober. And for what I understand about Damien Ober, this is his debut novel, and he's actually a screenwriter from what I've read and what I've been told. So he's a screenwriter, and he decided to venture off into writing a novel, science fiction, of course, and give this venture a try. When I read this book, well, first off, let me tell you what it's about. So it has a very interesting premise. That's why I picked it up. I bought it at Barnes and Noble, and it features all the founding fathers of the uh, Constitution. So it has about 48 or 49 of the founding fathers, and each of them has their own story in the novel. So all of them are dying of some internet plague. So back then, the founding fathers, they all had internet access. They all had computers, laptops, cell phones. Even back then, there was no satellite, so that doesn't even make sense. But anyway, they had technology back then, and something happened where there was a plague, through the internet or through the phones that they got, and they were all dying. So I thought that premise was pretty interesting. However, I found the novel kind of difficult to follow. There was a lot going on in the novel. It was very disjointed a lot of times. You would go from scenes of, the founding fathers, they're dying in their bed, they're talking to somebody or whatever, or they're interacting with, other, people in the novel. And then it would switch over, okay, here's the aliens, and the aliens just kind of just pop out of nowhere. There was no storyline for them to come in. There was no, hey, here comes the aliens. They just kind of just popped up, and that was all weird. So it kind of switched from scene to scene with no fluidity to it. Everything was just kind of, like I said, just disjointed a little bit, and it was really kind of hard to follow. And another thing with, the characters, because there was, excuse me, there were so many of them, so you couldn't really follow a logical pattern or develop a relationship with the characters. There was no emotional attachment or feeling to any of these characters, because they all had like a real quick scene, and everybody was dying, and there was really nobody you could kind of latch on to and kind of form a relationship with and follow. Or there was nobody in the novel that you could have like a favorite you can kind of follow. Everybody kind of had their own thing going, and it was like, okay, they're going to die, and then you kind of move on to the next person, and they're all trying to figure out this plague, what's going on, and no one's really kind of finding the answer to it. So I don't want to give too much away of the novel. I have a tendency of doing that a little bit, but it was kind of hard to follow. I couldn't get into it, at least, and I mean there was I don't want to say it was boring, but it kind of just lagged on a little bit. Like, you didn't know where the story was going, and I mean there were some lull times where you just kind of felt, okay, what's going on next? Because I really can't find a logical pattern going on with this novel. So it was just a weird concoction of just a lot of weird stuff, and like I said, then the aliens just kind of just come up, just whenever, and there was no really sensible pattern in this novel. Things just kind of just propped up, at its own convenience. And my goal with every book, I want to finish every book, no matter how bad or how disjointed or bad it is. I just have a goal. I just got to finish the book. However, I will admit there was one book. It wasn't this one, but there was a book. It was so bad I couldn't even finish it. I tried everything to read that book. I tried to read, a couple pages a day. I tried, you know, everything. I couldn't get through it. It was so bad, and it's not my genre of storytelling anyway. So anyway, but back to this book. So, like I said, the premise was good. That's why I picked it up. Technology in the 1800s, 1700s. That sounds pretty cool. But, I just couldn't really latch onto this. Like I said, there was no emotional attachment that, I could, get from the characters. And, like I said, and there's also some fighting going on as well. But it didn't really seem to connect with the story. So I didn't really get it. And like I said, I don't want to give too much away, but then there's this sea monster that kind of pops up in the end, and I don't know where this sea monster came from. He just kind of just arose out of the sea for no apparent reason. So I didn't get the connection to that as well. So, like I said, this book again, here it is. Like I said, Benjamin Franklin's Dream America. And this was, like I said, Damien Ober's first novel. I don't think he's written a novel after this. So I didn't like the book. Like I said, I kind of felt like I wasted my time a little bit with this. I could have found something a little bit more visceral to kind of, dive into. But this book just was not it. So just to sum it up, the ideas were interesting, but the execution was just chaotic. It feels less like a story and more like fragments of one. Like I said, they were just you'll read like 48 or 49 different perspectives of the founding fathers of this country. So, like I said, the fragments are of one consistently jumping or rarely grounding you, and ultimately it was just hard to follow. So, if you're looking for an interesting premise, this book is it. If you're looking for a fluid story that's fun and emotionally engaging, this book isn't it. So, that is my book review for today. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys later. Thank you very much.